Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining us today to discuss an important topic, creating a culture of care in higher education. I'm Dr. Kevin Yaudes. I am the former mental health content expert for the University of Louisiana System. I'm the department head for the Department of Psychology and Counseling at McNeese State University. This culture, creating a culture of care, is crucial not only for the success of our students, but also for fostering a strong sense of community on our campus. We've got a wonderful panel of experts here with us today who will share their insights on how faculty and staff can work together to nurture this culture of care. So first, let me introduce our panelists. We have Rebecca Boone, the director of Northwestern State University's Campus Counseling Center. Joining us as well is Monica Orsot, who works diligently in student retention as the director of freshman advising, retention, and advanced placement at McNeese State University. And we also have Dr. Taneshia Drake, who works closely with student affairs and supports our first generation students, which I was a first generation college student, as a senior academic advisor, first year success instructor at Southeastern Louisiana University. So thank you for joining us today. Thank you. To kick things off, I'd like to pose a question to each one of our panelists. We will start with Dr. Drake first. I also want to say to those in attendance today, if you have questions, feel free to put those in the chat. I will try to attend to the chat, and we have others behind the scene who are also looking at the chat as well. So, Dr. Drake, how do you think the relationship between professors and students can contribute to a culture of care on campus? Could you share some examples of strategies or practices you've implemented to ensure that the relationship is productive?
Absolutely. So I would say one of the primary things to consider would be the essence of community. One thing that we do here at Southeastern is we like to make the context in our courses consistent across the board. That way, our students may go to their first year experience course and have a conversation, and then go to their English course and continue that conversation with their professor. I would definitely say the relationships between your departments, your academic departments, your resource departments are very important. A lot of times students, especially those first gen students, they come on campus and their primary perceptions of what a college experience looks like, they may think that, oh, well, my professors, my academic professors don't necessarily communicate with my resource personnel. But having the relationships across the board really zones on that element of community to show the student that you are one university and across the board, everyone works together to make sure that we get that student from point A to point D or E, F, G, whatever the case may be. But for the most part, graduation is the ultimate goal. And if you don't continue those conversations beyond the first year with the student, then for them, it's just a check off of the list. For first year experience instructors, we like to communicate with the student after their first year. We don't want to just get you to your second semester. We make sure to keep communication with you, whether it be through social media or if we see you on campus, start the conversation of how's your major? Are you still in your major? How are your courses progressing? How's your sister? Are you still considering this job? So just being very transparent about, who you are in your professional capacity to the student, but also making sure that they understand that you have a relationship with others. So there may be something that I may not be able to do, but I can most certainly refer you to someone else on campus who can assist you with that. So definitely zoning in on that element of community across the university, not just in individual departments and entities throughout the campus.
I love that. I love that. Any thoughts from our panelists?
Would just echo that, excuse me, community and communication are vital, but also be very direct with your expectations, very clear, have clear office hours, consistency. I mean, because a lot of students, first year students, if something isn't quite what is stated, that can create stress for them. So, having that consistency is another layer that will help those students feel like, oh, well, I know I can go at this time and someone's going to be there. I think also within the classroom, scaffolded learning, things build upon one another. And sometimes having that scaffolding kind of concept to kind of help bridge, we don't assume that they know certain topics. And that kind of helps them. And certain universities might have programs where they may have cohorts of students or classes where they may have pairings of content material to kind of help them get through either a math or an English. And then just kind of speaking to the students and letting them know that, you know, being in a correct course doesn't mean a deficiency. It just means we need to refresh your ideas on certain things and make it more positive. I think that will definitely help.
I'll say that, and I shared that I was also a first generation college student. That did not occur to me until I will say decades later, because it wasn't something that was on, it didn't feel like it was a topic of conversation in higher education. And I realize now, many years later, that you don't know what you don't know. And so I love what everyone's saying, that when you're setting that expectation really with incoming freshmen, whether they're first generation or not, then you've got the basis to continue. But if you don't, then you're probably piecing it together in a way that is contrary to Dr. Jake, what you laid out that you do at Southeastern.
And what you said about you don't know, you don't know. Every single semester on the first day of class, I always tell my students, you don't know what you don't know until you don't know it. So that's definitely true. Definitely
That's
true.
right.
Yeah.
That's right. Thank you. All right. So, Rebecca, you've got the next question. I've got the next question for you. In your role as the director of the Counseling Center, what are some key mental health initiatives that have been particularly effective in promoting student well-being and a supportive campus environment?
Well, to piggyback on what's been said already, it's very important to have relationships across campus with faculty, staff, student organizations, housing, university police. We're blessed here at Northwestern that we have a culture of care that our faculty really do want to see our students succeed, or even, you know, university police. Everybody is here to help retain students and help them be successful. But a lot of times we need help and we need information. The days of being a counseling center that's set apart and, you know, kind of in a silo is gone. And the more we can share and educate faculty members on how to help students, how to support them, the better off our students are. And they really do want information. As you well know, there are times when faculty feel overwhelmed themselves, and then they have students who have such a high need for attention and for support, and it can be really overwhelming. We're bringing back a program that we had several years ago called Safe Haven. It's designed to train faculty and staff to be allies for students, for all kinds of students who are at risk, whether they're, you know, low income, have some sort of housing or financial hardship, if they LGBTQI community, any health concerns, any of our students who have disabilities, any of the students that you might find that have needs above and beyond, or who have some barriers that might create a sense of discrimination or not belonging to the community. And faculty self-select, and we'll be doing training with them again next week on suicide prevention, allyship, mental health concerns, Title IX, how to refer, all of those things. And they'll also have, when we get them printed, emblems or signs that they'll put on their office that identify them as part of the Safe Haven community. So students know that these are the faculty that they can go talk to, our staff, whomever. And so we hope that that will help a lot too. Students naturally find those faculty members or staff members, right, that they feel like they can talk to. But this recognizes them and gives them additional training. And hopefully our training with them will be ongoing on different topics that they identify that they need information about. So also, we do a lot of screening. We're doing it, I'm sure on every campus now with the move to screen all athletes. We're using the CAP screen, and we're starting to get referrals already from the CAP screen. I think that's really, really very helpful. We have the CAP screen on our website so students can go on anonymously and screen themselves. We hope that that will also help students identify themselves or validate that, yeah, maybe counseling might be helpful to me. Of course, we have 24-hour crisis call like everybody else does too on their campuses. But the biggest thing is the collaboration. None of us have big budgets, right? Some of our offices don't have any budgets at all, really. So we have to collaborate and pool our resources and our human resources and our ideas. And I think we do a really good job here in collaborating across campus to bring, activities to students, information, training, whatever is necessary to help students.
Well, I love what I'm hearing about Safe Haven. I love the description, the contents of that initiative. I am a faculty member at McNeese State University, and what you said really resonated with me. That I'm preparing for the beginning of the semester, which starts on the 19th for us. And I shared with the panel before we began that we also had 6 open searches this summer. We've hired 5 people. So that is great. That was a big relief. But the idea that sometimes I think TV and film put out about what it's like to be a faculty member. I'll go to A Beautiful Mind. It's not like that anymore. And I think we all know that. So it's not a matter of just teaching the classes that you're assigned and then maybe hanging out with students in a very casual way, but seemingly having tons and tons of free time. It's not the same world right now. And I think what has happened in higher education is that we've not kept up. We've not kept up because I truly believe that faculty care, that's part of the reason that we were drawn to the positions that we have. So we care, but sometimes time can be a constraint. And again, what you said really resonated with me because I found myself the past few weeks reaching out to other departments myself to assist a student when I knew that I would not be able to give appropriate amount of time for their need. And that is just such a good feeling, knowing that I can just make a call or stop by somebody's office and say, hey, I need an assist with this and then get it. So I love hearing about Safe Haven. Any other thoughts from the panel about mental health initiatives? Okay. Right. I know that we've had something similar at McNeese State University. It was called the Care Mentorship Program. And these types of programs, as you mentioned, self-select, that's important because then you know that the people who are coming into the program are doing so willingly because they have a desire to not just educate students, that's our job, but also interact with students and make sure that we can help them to cross that finish line for graduation.
Right.
Thank you, Rebecca. Monica, retention is a critical aspect of student success. What measures or programs have you found most effective in retaining students, especially those who might be at risk of leaving the university?
Okay. So there are 2 different models. There's the organic, where we have different reports that we run at different parts of the semester. Looking at midterm grades, reports from advisors on appointments, reports from instructors, and we kind of gained information that way. In that model, we missed some critical information from students. Did they have a death in the family that they didn't report to their instructors? Are they facing, food or housing insecurity? Other social, emotional metrics that we just missed. And so what McNeese did was about a year ago, we implemented the EAB Navigate platform throughout the university. And it took a lot of collaborative effort across the university with other universities to see what they were doing. It gave us a more holistic view of the student. Progress reports were made mandatory for all the freshman level courses. So at any point, if a progress report was issued, we had the student come in for advising just to kind of, make sure that we're there. They can voice any concerns they may have, and they can feel that there's a supportive team behind them. Student self-reporting in the app, the student could raise their hand to ask for resources or can avail themselves of the counseling services or any of the other, supportive services that we had on campus. When it came to resources, it was at a fingertip. They could look if they had food insecurity, where the food pantries are, clothing, because we have the cowboy closet. If they wanted to look at fitness, we have the rec and their hours already posted. Local places of interest for our international students who are not familiar with the area, or just, out of state students who are not familiar with our city. Campus maps was on there so they could follow their way to class. I mean, it's really a holistic platform. I mean, it's kind of pricey, but it gave us an ability to also look at our policies. So the moonshot for equity was that sister piece to the Navigate, where we looked at policies that may have become barriers for our students, especially first generation students, those without the support resources that they have, that aren't aware of what probation and suspension were. Also, we have a transcript hold. Well, policies and rules have changed where you can't hold on to a transcript. So how does that affect the student that we currently have? So we worked across the campus to kind of find ways that we can revise these policies. And we worked with Compete LA to also look at what their requirements were so that we weren't doing double work. So those students that fell in between, they stepped out one semester up to the 3 years. Let's look at that population. They were recently at the university. What can we do to re-recruit them? And what are some barriers that may be, part of the issue? Is it our application process? Is it easy to follow or navigate? When it came to the advising reports, they were more robust with the Navigate because we could see a bit more information across all of the instructors versus here and there, an occasional instructor report. So I feel like that helps. But if you can't afford, your university can't afford Navigate, I mean, you can still use the organic model, but communication and collaboration, like we reiterated before on other pieces, is so vital. Getting out of those silos, creating a network where, okay, I'm gonna walk you to this office. Hey, let me introduce you to so-and-so. They can help you with this and this. That more personal touch helps with students, especially they're so nervous to already be on campus. And some may face that, what they call it, whenever you don't feel like you belong or
Imposter syndrome.
imposter syndrome. Yes. They're like, well, I'm not a college student. Yes, you are. Let's go over, what things that can help you be successful. So retention, of course, is on everyone's plate. It's a vital piece of making sure that they meet their goals and we meet ours. But if a student doesn't feel connected socially, they don't feel like they belong. And so it's creating a network of things.
So you mentioned that you've heard students say, "I'm not a college student." Can you
Yes.
expand on that a little bit?
I've had a couple advisees where they come in and I'm asking, how did their progress go? And they're just like, I'm not a college student. None of my people went to college. Like, I don't know if this is for me. And I was like, well, what do you want to do? Let's get back to why did you apply to Magnes? And maybe look at ways we can foster some, relationships with different things that might interest you. Have you looked at this? But yes, it's surprising, especially when it's a young person coming in and they just finished high school and they're just like, and some of it could be their how they identify, they're coming in, they may have had certain expectations or things placed on them. Oh, you need to go work at the plants because that's a local thing, and so someone's telling them that they should go directly into the workforce and they're choosing college. So trying to get to what is your purpose, like why are you here, and reinvigorating that passion to be here. You know, what ways can we get you and propel you to your next step?
Okay. Rebecca, in your counseling center, have you seen, it almost sounds like some identity issues, and Monica, that's essentially what you said, like identity issues about, I am not a college student. This is, I'm hearing this for the first time. I'm very curious about this. Are you seeing this as well, Rebecca?
Yeah, yes, I do see it from time to time. Um, Not only I'm not a college student, but I'm not as smart as everybody else. I've got everybody fooled, but I know that I'm not college material. And it's a real problem, especially among females, although I'm seeing it more among males too now. It seems to be on the rise. I'm not sure what the root cause is for that increase, um, but it is an issue. Yeah. Along with anxiety, often accompanies that as well. A lot of anxiety. And
Dr.
I
Drake,
think
are you,
part of it is that they just don't understand the context yet. And the biggest problem that I see with students right now, thanks to social media, I think, is their tendency to compare themselves to everybody else. And they find themselves lacking in so many areas that absolutely has no basis whatever, except what they are interpreting from social media. And it is creating a big problem.
Dr. Drake, do you think this could be connected to first generation experience?
Absolutely. One thing that we need to consider is, what do we even define college student to be? You know, there are so many different types of college students. And when you look at your first generation college students, they're coming in with little to no exposure of the college experience. So they're basing their perceptions off of social media, pop culture, media, or what other people are telling them their college experience looks like, or what they're telling them their college experience has to look like. So I for sure know that first generation students have a difficult time specifically with that imposter syndrome, just because they've never experienced it and they don't know what it should be or what it should look like. So first generation students, when it comes to that imposter syndrome element, a lot of students come in and they look at other students who do have exposure or who did have exposure to college, and they start feeling the less than element. Oh, well, I don't belong here, or I shouldn't be here. I'm not equipped to be here. So absolutely, first generation students probably experience this more than any other students.
There's a comment in the chat from Heather Rivera. I had a student ask, when will the mistake get fixed? And I am not actually a student here. I'm unadmitted. This is a statewide thought pattern with our new students. Wow. Wow. Thank you for putting that in chat. Any thoughts about that? This is surprising to me, the issues around identity, but it sounds like it may be on all of our campuses and beyond as well.
I'm wondering how much, and I hate to keep going back to COVID, but the instructional experience that they had during COVID, I know a lot of them didn't get the full course content, felt like they were just passed because of COVID, don't feel like they have a good foundation in some of the courses. And I'm wondering how much that has to play into feeling like an imposter, that they know that maybe they have some deficits, not because of their intelligence, but because it wasn't presented to them.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's created some problems for sure.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you. So Dr. Drake, you work closely with first generation students. What unique challenges do these students face? And I know we've talked about this a little bit. And how can we as a campus community better support them to ensure they thrive both academically and personally?
Yeah, so the first is definitely imposter syndrome, and more so a lack of that sense of belonging once they do get to the campus setting. I would say that one thing that we can do in our positions is just to be mindful of the language that we're using with those students. You know, we're so used to using the jargon of our institutions, the everyday language. But to those students, they have very, very little knowledge of college in general. So us going in with our expertise and our knowledge is one thing, but when we go in with the knowledge of college, that's completely different. So that's why a lot of students aren't necessarily comfortable reaching out to their advisor or their professors about different things because of how we approach them with the basic information when it comes to college or even the academic content in the classroom. So I would say the first would be that imposter syndrome. The second challenge that I've noticed with our first generation students is that FOMO, that fear of missing out, specifically with our Gen Z first year, first gen students. A lot of those students who haven't been exposed to college, they get here and they feel as though they have to be involved in every single thing to make up for what their parents weren't able to achieve or what their siblings weren't able to achieve. So they ultimately aspire to join multiple clubs, organizations. They look to have the highest GPA possible. They want to be president. They want to be, in leadership positions. But what eventually happens is we have students who are over involved and under engaged. So I think one thing that we can, zone in on is really humanizing that student experience and really talking about what your specific college experience looks like. You don't have to join 5 organizations. Find something that really fits you. Find something that, aligns with your academic goals, with your professional goals. So the last thing I would probably say would be the lack of support at home. First generation students, they're coming in with, like I said, a little exposure to college. And when they go home, they don't necessarily have a lot of support. So while we're having those conversations in our advisor capacity and our faculty capacity, just making sure that we are mentoring those students, having those conversations with them to let them know we do care. At Southeastern, our core values are actually caring and excellence. So we're continuing those conversations with those students beyond the first year. And like I said earlier, if you're connected, if your departments are connected across campus, you have a system of support for those students to where if they go home, they don't need to have or they don't need to rely on a family support system. When they come to your institution, you are their family. You do take care of them. So I would say that's probably one of the biggest challenges, or the biggest challenges will be that lack of support at home, the imposter syndrome, and then that fear of missing out.
Okay. Any other thoughts from the panel?
I'd probably add also being a self-advocate. Often they don't know how to ask the question or they're afraid to ask a question. And, telling them that it's okay. Bring up a couple scenarios like, this happens. Well, what do you do? What do you mean? What do I do? Okay, well, let's work through it. What resources do you have on campus that can help you address this issue? And so after having a few conversations with students and they realize, oh, I can ask the teacher that. Yeah, you could ask them. They're there, they're human, they're not far removed from you. Or if you have an issue, how to address it. We can work through processes. I just need you to let me know that something's going on and taking that first step, I think that's
the
important
problem,
too.
though. A lot of times the problem is them not wanting the professor or someone to know that they don't know,
Right.
that they feel like they should know. I think normalizing it that nobody if their freshman year knows, and it's okay to ask questions over and over and over again, and till you're comfortable.
So, Rebecca, I'm glad you brought up normalizing because I just reflecting as we're having this discussion that I shared I was also a first generation college student. I wasn't it was a different time and I didn't think about it often until I started advising, and I had a conversation early on with an advisee, and it just came up organically, and I mentioned, well, I'm also a first generation college student. The conversation changed. It changed in that moment. I could see the change on their face as well. And again, it was organic. I was not saying for any other reason than to probably just normalize. I'm also a counselor, and and things changed, and my relationship with that student changed, and perhaps, and now I will I still allow it to come up organically. I don't insert it into every advising conversation or every conversation I have with a student. But if it comes up, I will share that because they may think that the faculty that they're talking to or the staff member that they're talking to couldn't possibly understand what it might be like to be a first generation college student. So sharing that, I've noticed, has really opened up some conversations and some doors that probably would have remained closed.
Well, and you become a good role model too of what a first generation student can aspire to. And I think that's wonderful as well for them to know who the first gens on campus are.
Right. And I agree.
And
Yeah.
that's really a way to connect them, you know, all the first gen faculty, staff, stand up, identify yourself.
Right.
Hey,
We actually do something in our first year experience courses in November to highlight our first gen students. So we call it our First to Roar initiative, where we just, give them a little love and let them know that we see them and they belong here. You have a place here just as everyone else does.
All right. I'm going to ask some general questions to the panel, so feel free to jump in whenever you'd like. So how can faculty and staff balance the need for academic rigor with the need for creating and maintaining a supportive learning environment?
that's a hard one.
That is
It's a really hard one. And I have faculty ask me all the time because they are compassionate. You know, how many mental health days do I need to let my students take? They just come in and say, I need a mental health day, and they disappear, or they don't come in for a test because they needed a mental health day. And it is a hard question, and I'm not sure there's an answer that applies across the board, except the courses, the curriculum, and the university do have expectations for completion of coursework. And if you're not there, and especially in some of the majors like our creative and performing arts, that's participatory. They have to go to class. They're not getting information, they're not getting the grades if they're not there. And it is really a difficult struggle for a faculty who recognize, yeah, there are some mental health issues. And, I heard Monica say too about expectations. We have to set expectations very clearly in a class even. So what do you do? I've talked to them about asking the student, what are you doing to manage your mental health? And if that student can say, I'm going to counseling, I'm doing this, I'm doing that, and they can tell that that student is actively engaged in getting better, whether they're seeing us or another therapist, off campus. We get them registered with our accessibility and disability support. That way it's legitimate. They have accommodations. It doesn't mean they don't need to do the work. They still need to do the work, and they may not get the grade they want if they're not there participating. But at least there are some accommodation and it's above board. If it's a student that says, I'm not doing anything, the first time that happens, refer them to counseling services and then follow up with them. And if they continue not to work on their mental health, then, it's really very difficult, because it's like, if you're not doing what you need to do to help yourself, and maybe it's not counseling they need, maybe it's something else they need, another resource on campus or whatever. They've got to meet the professor halfway. It's not just about going to your dorm room or apartment and checking out. I don't know what the real, the pat answer is or what the policy should look like. But I know it's very frustrating and difficult for faculty members to try to teach and have students opt out of class over and over and over again, and then feeling like I've got to reteach this or whatever. So if y'all have any good ideas to share, I would love to hear them.
Any other thoughts?
Well, I kind of echo what she said about the clear and consistency, like the clear expectation of what's expected, stated in the syllabus, maybe reviewed at the beginning of a course. This is what is expected of you as a student. And if you have issues, communicate. The teacher or the instructor doesn't know what's going on in your personal life. They don't know there was a death in the family. They don't know you're struggling with issues. They can direct you to resources that can help you. Um, Oftentimes, like we said it before, our first gen students, they may know that there's resources, but they don't know how accessible, how easy it is to actually use them.
Mhm.
I faced this conversation with my advisors. They kept sending out something called resources, and they kept wondering why students weren't following the directions. I said, because you titled it resources. Supplemental materials, how many people read that? It's in the language. So, these are things to help you. These are things to help you be on track to graduate and also help you holistically. I think also when it comes to some of students that are facing issues, they may hear certain things from other students like, oh, just say you had COVID or, things like that. And they think it's a free pass. But at a certain point, you have to have that expectation clearly stated and the follow through. I mean, there's, of course, exceptions up to the discretion of the situation and the instructor. But, I think she said, communication, state what it is that you expect.
Thank you, Monica. And Dr. Drake, I think that's in line with what you were saying about the language that we use. So I think I'm sensing a theme here that the way that we communicate will impact the way that the students will communicate.
Absolutely. And one thing with our first generation students specifically is they affiliate college success with this super dynamic high GPA, and they expect for their professors and their advisors to expect that from them as well. And us as faculty and staff, we have to realize we work in higher education. Students change every single day. The way that we work changes every single day. But one thing that we can do to make sure that we do have a balance and we don't get burnt out, it's just to have those transparent conversations with those students to say, hey, reality, thinking realistically, what is your goal GPA? It doesn't have to be a 4.0. If your goal GPA is a 2.5, what do we need to do to get you there? And then if you decide to increase that a little bit later, we can work on that. But realistically, we need to meet you where you are today and take a look at the whole picture, take a look at the student holistically, like you said, and then just go from there. That way we're not overworking ourselves, coming up with, these grand curriculums and, these lessons, and then our students decide to change their major the next day, or they take a test and now they're on probation. So, just thinking holistically and thinking about the language that we use with those students in our pedagogy and our advising practice, even just a conversation that we're having in passing, so the conversations that we have with the students make the most impact for sure.
Well, and another thing to consider is how many of our students work. And some of them work nights. And, I have some that work at hotels that are motels cleaning. I have night clerks. I have some that are guards, security guards at places overnight. Work, the hours that they work every week is full time plus going to class. It's really hard sometimes for them to go to class. But the reality still is, do you want a college degree? And in order to get a college degree, you've got to meet certain standards. That's just the way it is. Same thing with mental health issues. If your mental health issues are so severe that you can't go to your classes, maybe you need to check out for a semester and get stabilized and then come back instead of ruining your GPA and, maybe losing your TOPS or whatever, financial aid, and messing your life up, but they see that a lot of times as a failure when it's not. I mean, if you had a physical illness that, you was so severe you couldn't go to class, you would probably end the semester for yourself and wait until you're well again to come back. I think that needs to kind of be an expectation. sometimes, and it's a difficult conversation to have with students.
It can be. It occurs to me as we're having this conversation, this larger conversation, that I see the same thing with graduate students. So with graduate students, obviously they've already completed an undergraduate degree, but there were many times, and based on previous career that I've had, the language and the way we communicate is usually front and center in my mind. But I realized that it was not front and center enough for graduate students because when I first started working with graduate students, I realized, oh, wow, some of our graduate students are coming in thinking that they will still take 5 classes when 3 would be full time, or they don't understand that they will have a comprehensive exam because that's standard for a master's program. And I was a little surprised that, wow, same thing with graduate students. And it made me really consider how I communicate and how we communicate as a faculty with our graduate students. And we've incorporated some of what students need to know into our handbook, which will be available to them. And it's changed the timeline for when we do outreach. We started doing some informational Zoom sessions, a semester before we would start accepting applications, so we can provide some information about things like you've got to consider your current finances, because grad school is going to take a good chunk of time, especially if it's in a clinical discipline. You've got the theory and then you've got the practice. It's going to take you some time. So it's really, it's made me think about the way that we interact with, yes, our graduate students, but students in general, because that was a little surprising to me. Surprising.
Right. And the price, that they pay too sometimes for relationships,
Mhm.
master's and doctoral programs can be really strenuous. And as you said, time consuming, and you don't have a whole lot of time for relationships. So having that conversation with your significant other and what this might bring to your life, and getting them on board as well, I think is really important.
Okay. So my next question for the panel is, what are some ways faculty and staff can use technology to enhance a supportive learning environment?
I would say become familiar with it on your own terms. The worst thing that you can do as a faculty member or staff is try to make yourself look tech savvy when you're not. Because
That's
students, one thing about students, they will let you know.
That's right.
We have no problems telling you this isn't it, this isn't working. So if it's not your
Right.
thing, you don't have to force it. We do have students
Right.
who
Get somebody else to do it.
right, get somebody else to do it.
Yeah.
It doesn't have to
Mhm.
be your thing. As Gen Z students, technology, even social media, it's not every single student thing. A lot of students aren't on social media. And if we make social media or technology the foundation of what we do, then we're taking away a crucial part of higher education. There are ways to integrate it, of course. I mean, we could use TikTok, videos in our lectures, or maybe send them a chat here and there. But for the most part, I don't think if it's your thing, you don't have to force it into your practice to make an impact. There are other ways for you to make an impact or to make a difference with students.
Nice.
Would think also having like virtual office hours, especially for students who work or can't make it to campus, or your online students if you have an online discipline. Collaborative tools. I know that, for some classes they may have group work, a shared Google Doc, or, a shared PowerPoint as for a group presentation. Is you wanting to create a community, a cohort of students. One of the things that I've done research on, because I'm working on my dissertation, is in that sense of community. And it's with Northwestern, by the way. I potentially
Okay.
graduate this fall. So, it's in that sense of community with students. They tend to persist better than students who feel isolated or that they're alone working through something. I mean, and it's natural. As humans, we want to have that. Oh, yeah, I have a friend in this class. If I'm missing, I can take their notes and we're good. So I've seen different models where some instructors that first day will be like, okay, turn to the person to the left or the right of you, or find at least 2 people in the class where you can exchange numbers with. That'll be your partner in that class. so that if you have to miss or they miss, you know, you have the notes. And you could also create a study group in that way. And I would say also maybe taking a look at what will naturally fit in your class when it comes to technology. Is like Dr. Drake had mentioned, you know, if it's not a natural thing for you to do, it becomes very awkward, especially for the students having to utilize it when they encounter problems. Because tech problems abound. It could be a browser issue, it could be any number of things. And then you're sitting there, you miss the point of the lesson, you know. But that creating a sense of community, I think is very vital, regardless of what technology you use.
Okay. And so in the chat, James Grimes, thank you, James. And that would also set a professional boundary versus possibly overstepping and being too friendly with the students, which is also healthy role modeling. Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. I think that's something that my assumption is that most faculty intentionally consider their relationship with their students. And I hope that's the case. I do believe that's the case about how are we going to interact, and difference between being friendly, which I also hope we are, versus a friend. Two very different things, because that professional boundary, even as we're offering support, and Rebecca, you said it, like, this is difficult to navigate, but maintaining that professional boundary is extremely important, because ultimately we're responsible for educating students and assisting them on matriculating through their degree program. Thank you, James. One final question to the panel here. And it's in line, James, with what you just put in the chat. How can faculty create a balance between being approachable and maintaining professional boundaries with students?
Boundaries for
Well,
sure. Absolutely setting boundaries. I know with me, students look at me and they think I'm a student. You know, they walk in the classroom like, oh, you know, you're my instructor. And that's pretty difficult. It's pretty difficult to set those boundaries, but to also make them, you know that they can approach me because I am their person, their advisor, their instructor. But I would just say being very transparent about those boundaries. We are in a college setting. I do have those collegiate expectations of you. I do uphold my classroom in a certain capacity. I do uphold my advising sessions in a certain way. But really just setting those boundaries and really knowing the student, because there are certain limits with students as well. Students may not be or don't want you to approach them, but how do you reach the student? How do you make sure that your impact is had on the student as well? So setting those boundaries early on, first day class, making sure that, you communicate consistently, but in a consistent manner, you don't switch it up. But definitely setting those boundaries for sure.
I agree
So-
Yeah,
with
I
you.
think considering what are your needs and what are their needs. And I think sometimes we tend to overstep when we are focusing on wanting to be liked or wanting to be that popular person on campus or that popular faculty member in that, major or whatever. And I think it's really important to step back and think about your needs versus the student's needs, and keep the student's needs in mind, not yours.
I
You
would
know.
also add to that, maybe avoid oversharing.
Mm.
It can be you having a conversation with a student. They don't need to know all of your personal information. Maybe there's a point here or there that you can share empathy on and be like, I can understand that. I face something similar, but you don't have to go through all of the details. Also, social media, it becomes very tricky whenever you become friends with, and not sharing personal cell phone numbers. You want to maintain integrity, when it comes to your communications with the student. And they can come by your office and have a chat, but when it gets to be a bit too much where you feel like the student is expecting a certain connection that isn't appropriate, it needs to be addressed, it doesn't have to be in a negative light, but you can just talk about expectations and certain boundaries, setting healthy boundaries for themselves as well. Because there may be something in their life that is an unhealthy boundary, and they think this is how relationships are supposed to work. Every communication I have is supposed to be this way. And it's like, well, let's talk about this, and it may help set them on a certain trajectory, so.
To
One thing
piggyback on that, I think some students are really, really lonely. That's a big problem on campus, is loneliness. And sometimes they can't come and hang out in a faculty member's office that's friendly, to get their social needs met, and encouraging those students to get connected some other way with other students is really, really important.
Yeah, especially our first generation students. Sometimes they look at their advisor or their instructors to take the place of, their parents or, that guardian position in their life. But I believe we are, in a way, guardians of academic progression and engagement, but there still needs to be some type of boundary to where we don't take on, extra work or extra responsibilities or extra emotions that come along with that.
Right.
I think I've seen this play out and we've talked a lot about communication uh, during our time together today in email communication. And sometimes, and I can understand, especially for first generation college students, that seeing a PhD after somebody's name might not be completely clear that a proper way to begin an email would be, hello, Dr. Fill in the blank. I've noticed it with email communication that comes from a phone. And it seems to be even more of a concern. No greeting, no capitalization, no punctuation, as if they were speaking to a friend. And those conversations where a faculty member or anyone, a faculty member, staff member, needs to instruct the student that, hey, the proper way to reach out is Dr. Yaudes in this case. And that is true also when you're responding from your phone. Those can be difficult conversations, but they're necessary conversations to have.
I agree. That's one of the things that we cover in some of our intro or onboarding for freshmen is email etiquette.
Mhm.
How do I address my instructor or a department head or a dean? You want to be respectful and you want to be able to get your message across. And also you want to be identifiable. I can't tell you how many emails I get and I can't identify the student. I have the email address, but no student name or ID number.
Are
So
you?
exactly.
Right.
So yeah. I think someone made a comment in the James made a comment in the chat.
Or even sharing indirectly, like I had a friend who went through something similar and this is what helped them, or I know someone who had a similar experience and this was really helpful for them. That's spot on. That's good advice, doing it indirectly, because these conversations do need to happen. And it can be challenging because the intention is not to humiliate the student or offend a student, but when they're finished with their undergraduate degree or their graduate degree, they're going to go out into the workforce if they're not already there already, and that professional communication will be an expectation. All right. Well, that is all the questions we have for today. So before we wrap up, I want to thank each of our panelists for sharing their valuable perspectives and experiences. Creating a culture of care is a collaborative effort, as you've all mentioned, and hearing from different parts of our campus community highlights the importance of working together, as you've also all shared today. Thank you to everyone who attended today, and let's continue this important conversation beyond the session to ensure our campuses remain a supportive and nurturing environment for all. Thank you.